Hello everyone, I'm Mumchil Morgalat Kiryakov, and today I will try to introduce you to the wonderful world of Through the Ages, my latest favorite game. It's a board game that has been adopted for digital, and I think the digital version is extremely good. I haven't played the actual board game, but I've been quite hooked to the digital one. So get ready for, as the name suggests, fascinating journey into the history of mankind with a lot of actual leaders, wonders, technologies, and so on. So, without further ado, let's start with the rules of the game. It's a pretty complicated game, so I want to start with this disclaimer. So I fully realize that at some point you can get bored or you can just stop paying full attention to what I'm saying. But that's fine. It's a video, so at any point you can stop and continue if you want to do it at a later time. So when I explain the rules of a game, I like to start from the goal. How do you win a game of Through the Ages? So Through the Ages is a game where 2 to 4 players play free for all against each other, and the ultimate goal is to accumulate the maximum amount of this resource here called culture. So it's one of the resources that you can get in the game, and this resource serves only for winning. It doesn't have, I think it doesn't have any other function in the game. So yeah, when the game ends, whoever has the highest culture wins. Now, how do you... So I guess the next question is, how does the game progress? Because I said when the game ends, whoever has the highest culture wins. Well, what you see here at the top, these are called civil cards. They are drawn from a few deck of cards. When I click on this yellow card here, you can see we have A, 1, 2, 3. These are the ages in the game. So we have Ancient Age, First Age, which is the Middle Ages, then we have the Second Age and the Third Age. And basically, cards from these decks are drawn. You always draw cards from the earliest possible age until the deck is depleted. So at the start of the game, you see that we have only HA cards. Then, I mean, HA cards are a bit specific. So these are cards that, we draw from the ancient deck only at the start of the game and during the first turn. After that, we discard the HA cards. For every other age, cards are drawn from this deck until all cards are deeply depleted. And then we move to the second age. So the moment the last card is drawn from the H3 deck, so we move automatically to one more turn, which is called H4, although there are no cards, so there is nothing in H4, just an extra turn for everybody to wrap up their game, and then the game ends. So how do we move the cards here in this row? So you take cards from here, and once the turn is over, after everyone's turns, the row automatically moves to the left to fill in the empty spaces. So on the rightmost part, new cards are drawn from the respective deck. And yeah, this happens every turn until all the decks are depleted. how do you take cards from this row? You see these white balls, white circles at the bottom. This is the cost you pay to take a card. And this cost is paid with something called civil actions. So let me click on this player, for example, Ramil. You see that he starts the game with 4 civil actions. Everybody starts with 4 civil actions. And you pay with these civil actions every turn. And I mean, civil actions are used for almost everything you do in the game, not only for taking cards from the civil cards row, but it's one of their uses. And once you take all the cards that you want to take and the turn ends, the row moves to the left. You might wonder why some cards are worth 1 civil action, others are worth 2, and then we have some cards even that are worth 3 civil actions. Well, the cost of a card, of a civil card on this row is not tied to the card itself, but to its position. So as I said earlier, the cards start appearing from the right. So the newest cards, they appear from the right, which means that the rightmost card, if you want to take some of the newest cards, you have to pay more. So the position is what determines the cost. The first 5 cards, they always cost 1 civil action. Then we have 4 more cards that cost 2 civil actions. And finally, we have the final 4 cards on the row that cost 3 civil actions. And yeah, that's how you move the ages. Now, I want to talk a bit more about the civil cards themselves. As I said, they are taken from these decks, these H decks. So as I talk about them, and probably I'll make a few turns, what we are looking at the moment is a replay from my last game. This is not a live game because I usually use 24 hours time control, which means that I make 1 turn every 24 hours. So this is a game that I played for about 3 weeks or something like that, and it has ended recently. So I decided to use it as an educational tool. So let's see how the civil cards look, and I will try to summarize the most. I'm sorry about the dogs barking, can't control this. So do I start with the civil cards, or probably I start with the resources? Okay, so I guess I will start with a different type of resources. I already talked about the coacher. It's a resource that helps you win the game. At the end of the game, you want to have more coacher than everybody else. That's it. However, keep in mind that it's probably a trap to start accumulating a lot of coacher from the start, because coacher doesn't help you develop your game, which means that it doesn't scale. So in order to get a lot of coacher, the more the game progresses, you need to have other resources that help you get even more coacher. So let's have a look at these other resources. So first of all, it's important to say that Through the Ages is a game that combines worker placement with card management, which makes it extra complex, but also extra deep and very interesting, in my opinion. I love games with a lot of moving pieces, a lot of agency, and Through the Ages is exactly that. There is a lot of agency, and usually whether you win or you lose, it's based on what you do and what your opponents do, more than it's based on luck. There is a randomization, of course, but yeah, if you really play well, I think you will win in a very big percentage of the time. So how is it a worker placement game? So your so-called buildings in the game are basically technologies. So these are technologies that first you need to research with this resource called science. And once you research the technology, what happens is that you might put multiple workers, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, if you, it depends on how many you can afford and how many you need. And every worker on this technology yields for you, give you certain yield. For example, let me give you an example. Philosophy is a starting technology. That's why it doesn't have a science cost. None of my starting technology has a science cost. So I will show you the science cost with other technologies. But what's important here is that you see this tree and then this OR icon. This means that each worker you put on philosophy costs 3 OR. I'll call this OR, although depending on the level of technology, this type of resource in the later ages becomes iron, then coal, then oil. But let's just call that, this is the production resource, basically, what you use for production. So in order to get the yield from philosophy, you have to put workers there. So every worker you have on philosophy costs you 3 of this production resource. And every worker you have on philosophy at the end of the turn yields you 1 science. Just the same logic applies here with religion. Every worker you put here costs 3 resources, 3 production resources, 3 ore. And every worker you have on religion produces you 1 happy face and 1 culture. I will talk about happy faces in a bit. And that's how almost all of your buildings in the game work. You research the technology, you pay some science cost. Again, the HA technologies, you have them for granted, so you don't need to research them. And then you put workers on them, you pay the cost for putting every worker there. And then at the end of your turn, each worker that you have on this technology produces some yield. All right, so let's talk about workers. So this yellow bank here is your worker pool. So what you see here are the potential workers, the potential for worker. Each civilization starts with this amount of potential workers. Also, what we have here are the idle workers, the unemployed guys. In order to move a potential worker to an idle worker, you need to spend a civil action. As I told you, civil actions are used for everything in the game, not for just taking cards. So you spend a civil action, you pay the respective food cost. This is the first resource here. You pay the respective food cost, and then you move 1 potential worker into the unemployed workers. And from there, from the unemployed workers pool, you can start assigning these guys to your different technologies and actually make them work and do stuff for you. A few notes, a few specifics about your yellow bank. Let's call it yellow bank or worker bank. I think yellow token bank is what it's called in the game, so I'll call it like that. The more workers you get, so the more workers you get from your potential pool, the more expensive it becomes. So you see that first, recruiting an idle worker costs 2 food. But then, after you recruit your first 2 workers and you move to the second part of your bank, then this number 3 is revealed, which means that you actually have to pay 3 food for recruiting these workers. When you recruit them, you have to pay 4 food, and so on and so on. So the deeper you tap into your yellow bank, the more expensive it is to recruit workers. You can also see these minus food modifiers. This means that your food production, so the more workers you attract, they eat more food, which means that it's harder to feed them, which means that your food production decreases. So right now, at the start of the game, I have the agriculture technology. I have 2 workers on the agriculture technology, which means that at the end of my turn, I produce 2 food, right? You see that each worker produces 1 food. Well, if I, let's say, recruit my first 2 workers from here, and I move to the second part of my yellow food bank, I'll get a -1 food production modifier, which means that I will start producing -1 food. So it's +2 from my agriculture, from my workers on agriculture, then -1. That makes +1 food production per turn instead of +2 as I usually produce before tapping into this second section of the yellow bank. And to make things even more complicated, another, I mean, it's not exactly a resource, but another stat related to your yellow bank are the happy faces. So the more guys you attract, the more workers, the more people you attract to your civilization, the harder it gets to keep them happy. So you need to have a source of happy faces based on how deep you are in your yellow bank. So once I recruit my first 2 workers, I need 1 happy face. Then when I recruit my next 4 workers, I need 1 more happy face. And then for each 2 workers, I need 1 more happy face. So what happens if I don't have a happy face? So if I don't have enough happy faces? So first, each idle worker can compensate for a missing happy face. What does this mean? This means that, let's say that I need 1 happy face, right? But I have 1 idle worker here. So instead of, you see it now that it is yellow, actually it will glow in red. This means that this guy is unhappy. He's unhappy, but he's idle. So workers that are, so he's basically this 1 unhappy face represents 1 unhappy worker. Each unhappy face represents 1 unhappy worker. And if this 1 unhappy worker is in the idle worker pool, then that's fine. It's not something that has negative consequences for us. However, imagine that I need 1 happy face and I have 0 idle workers. This means that 1 unhappy worker is actually doing job for me. He's working for me and he's unhappy. So what happens is that at the end of your turn, they basically don't produce anything. And by saying they, I mean that this unhappy worker makes all workers produce nothing. So this is a situation that you should avoid at all costs. So if you're missing happy faces, you need to at least match them with your idle workers. If you have unhappy workers that are actually working, I mean, in real life, it's like that as well, right? You don't want unhappy people to be working for you because they will sabotage your work. What happens is that you lose your entire production for the turn. Even 1 unhappy worker working here loses you the entire production for the turn. So avoid that at any cost. You will produce no food, no ore, no science, no culture, nothing. Okay? And that's the yellow bank, right? As I said, it's a pretty complicated game. Now, since we are down here anyways, let's talk a bit about the blue bank with these blue tokens, blue cubes. They're exclusively related to your production of food and ore. So you see that on your agriculture and on your bronze, you see how much food and ore you produce, right? So each worker on such technology, at the end of the turn, in order to produce this amount of food and ore, it delivers 1 unit equals to this amount. So agriculture, each worker produces 1 food. This means that it brings 1 blue token and it puts it on the agriculture technology. And this 1 blue token that you take from here and put it here equals 1 food, right? Because agriculture says that each worker produces 1 unit and 1 unit is equal to 1 food. I'm saying this because they're more advanced technologies. So let me show you, let's say iron. So what iron does, it's an upgrade of the bronze. So what it does is that each worker produces you 2 ore, right? So it's not 1, it's 2 of these production resources. But this is still 1 blue token. So it is 1 unit that you take, 1 blue token, but it is worth 2 ore. So what is the meaning? Why do we move all these blue cubes, you would ask? Well, you see this -2, -4, -6. What happens is that at the end of the turn, before production, if you have a revealed minus number, you suffer the consequences of corruption. And the consequences of corruption are that you first lose this amount of resources. I mean, by resource, I mean ore. So you will first lose to ore, and then you will produce. Why is this game mechanic? I mean, it's not just to add additional complexity. What the goal of this mechanic is to prevent you from stockpiling too many resources. So if you have too many blue cubes stockpiled on your food and production resource technologies, and you don't use these resources, somebody gets tempted to steal from them. In real life, it's like that as well. I mean, Through the Ages is a lot like real life, by the way. So you suffer the consequences of production. So the goal of this mechanic here is to incentivize you to use your resources, to actively use your resources instead of stockpiling them. So if you just stockpile resources for the sake of it, you will lose some of them each turn due to corruption. Okay, so we got through this, and this is, I think yellow bank is one of the more complicated parts of the game. So if you understand the yellow bank and the blue bank, then you're good. The rest of it wouldn't look that complicated, wouldn't feel that complicated. So with by the way, there are also military technologies, but I'll talk about them a bit later. They work the same way as the other technologies, but each worker on a military technology, instead of giving you some other resource, what it does is that it adds strength to your civilization, and strength is used for aggressions, wars, that I'll talk about a bit later. But yeah, so let's look at the civil deck, let's say for H1, and talk about the different types of cards. I will start with, so first of all, you always have the same cards for H1, H2, and H3, with the exception of the leaders. Leaders are these green cards, and the wonders are the purple cards. So the set of leaders and wonders for each age is custom each game. It's taken from a larger pool of leaders and wonders, but the other cards are the same always. So what are the types of cards? First, we have the technologies. So the technologies are divided into rural technologies and urban technologies. The rural technologies, they are for producing ore and food. So how do a technology work? So you take it, so you pay some civil action to take it from the roll. Then you have to pay another civil action plus the science cost to develop this technology. And once you develop this technology, so you've researched, I mean, the correct term is research the technology. Once you've researched the technology, you can start putting workers on them. So you need to get the workers from your worker pool. Then you have to pay the cost, put the worker on the technology, and it starts producing for you every turn the respective amount of ore or food. Something that is very important as a mechanic in the game, and it works for all type of technologies, is that technologies from the same type allow you to upgrade your workers. What does this mean? So if I, let's say, research irrigation, right? So irrigation is a technology that it costs 4 ore to put a worker there, and it produces 2 food per turn. So right now, at the start of the game, I have 2 workers on agriculture. Let's imagine that I've researched irrigation. What I can do is that instead of putting a new worker on irrigation and paying for ore, I can upgrade one of my agriculture workers and make this worker an irrigation worker. To do that, again, I have to pay a civil action. Everything in this game costs a civil action. I won't repeat it every time, but just civil action is the number of civil actions is one of your most precious resources. So just keep in mind that you are usually restricted by the number of your civil actions at what you can do. So I can take the worker, I can pay the difference between the 2 technologies. So an agricultural worker costs 2 ore, and an irrigation worker costs 4 ore, which means that I take this worker, I pay the difference, which is 2 ore, and I move them from agriculture to irrigation, and they become an irrigation worker. And this works for all types of technology. So you will see in the game that all the food technologies, they are called farm technologies. All the ore technologies, they are called mine technologies. All the all the science technologies, they are called lab technologies, I think. These are temple technologies, and so on and so on. So workers are upgradable based on which technologies you research. And this is important because you're limited by the number of workers that you can recruit. At some point, you just can't recruit any more workers. So upgrading workers via means of, getting them to work on better technologies is important. So that's about the technology card. So we have the rural technologies, we have the urban technologies. So for example, geology is an urban technology. So each worker here provides you with 2 happy faces and 1 culture every turn. Alchemy is upgrade of the philosophy. So this is a science technology, a lab technology. Each worker there gives you 2 science, and so on and so on. There are a lot of different technologies here. You will see these blue technologies. So they're a bit special. What makes them special is that you don't put workers on them. So they're research and forget type technologies. You research them and they just provide you with a bonus. You don't need to put workers or anything. They're called civil technologies, or I don't know, something like that. And unlike urban technologies, they are not upgradable, although there are different versions based on the age for these technologies. But if you research a more advanced version of this technology, you automatically lose the older technology. So let's say that I have warfare in H1. I've researched that. Warfare gives me 1 strength and 1 extra military action. So then I go to H2 and I research strategy, which is basically the same technology, the better version of this technology in H2. What happens is that I lose warfare and I get the strategy instead. So it's a good idea to plan a bit ahead and basically research these types of technologies only once, because it's a waste to recruit the same type of technology more than once, unlike these other technologies that are upgradable, because these are not. Okay, now perhaps it's time to talk about governments here. The number of civil and military actions that you have for each turn is determined by the government that you have. Everybody starts with despotism, which is 4 civil and 2 military actions. However, in the civil cards, there are better governments that you can take and you can research them like every other technology. These governments typically give you a better amount of civil and military actions. Sometimes they give you other stuff like Theocracy, for example, gives you one culture per turn, one extra science, one happy face. But what you will notice for these governments is that they have two science costs. So they have the normal science cost, like every other technology has it. Like monarchy, it has 8. It costs 8 science to research it. But they also have this other cost. So this is the revolution cost. So you can change your government peacefully, and then you pay the bigger number for science. But you can also research a government using revolution. So what revolution does is that you pay much less science, but you have to forfeit all your civil actions. And it's important that you can't just spend your civil actions and then make a revolution. Revolution requires for you to have not spent any civil actions. So you basically skip your turn because most of the stuff that you do in your turn requires civil actions. So if you're willing to effectively skip a turn, you can change your government using much less science, so much better science cost. But yeah, I mean, it's typically not a great idea because the game, I don't know, it's about 20 something turns. So if you skip a turn, this is like 5% of your game. So I rarely do that. I mean, there are situations where you have to do it, or it's good. I mean, it's efficient to do it, but they are very specific. So yeah, so that's about the government. Now you also have. Let's talk about the good stuff: the leaders and the wonders. So leaders are exactly that. People that lead your civilization. You can't have more than one leader at a time. So again, you pay the civil cost, as with every other civil card, to take the leader from the row. And then, for one civil action, you appoint this leader, and he becomes the leader of your civilization. They give you all, I mean, the type of bonuses that you get from the leaders, they are very specific. They are unique. Each leader is unique. What's common for every leader is that there are two things that are important for the leaders. The first one is that if you move to an age that is 2 ages away from the original age of the leader, so for example, this is an H1 leader, Saladin is an H1 leader. The moment you move to H3, if Saladin is the leader of your civilization, you lose him. So he automatically retires. So the leaders can be active only during their age and the next age. Also, when you replace an older leader with a new one, the older one returns the civil action back. So basically, effectively, you don't use the civil action. So let's say that in HA, I have taken Boudica, right? And then I want to replace her with Saladin. So what happens is that I pay one civil action to replace Boudica with Saladin, but Boudica retiring gives me one civil action back, which means that effectively I don't spend civil actions. So it is important to follow the rhythm of the leaders and replace them before they retire automatically because of the advancing of the ages, because you are saving one civil action like that. But yeah, it's I'm not going through every leader. You will see them during some of the games that I will show, but every leader is unique. But these are the two most important things about the leaders. They retire automatically after you advance to an age that is 2 ages away from the original age. So for H1, that's H3. For HA, that's H2. For H2, that's H4, so after the end of H3. And yeah, that's it about the leaders. The other interesting part, the other interesting type of card here are the wonders. So wonders, when you take a wonder from the civil row, it automatically starts building itself. So you don't take it in your hand. So every other card, when you take it, you have perhaps this is something I should have started with. You'll have a civil cards hand. So imagine that you accumulate the cards in your hand and you have to play them, right? And by the way, the number of cards that you can have, the number of civil cards that you can have in your hand is limited by the number of your civil actions. So while you're at despotism, you can have a maximum of 4 cards in hand. So you need to start using them before you can get new cards. The wonders, they don't get added to your hand. They automatically are put on your board and they start being built. So the wonders are typically built in stages. And you can see the stages and how much they cost here at the bottom. So for example, the Library of Alexandria, it has 3 stages. So to build the first stage, it costs you 1 ore. Then the second stage costs you 4. And the third stage costs you 1 more ore. So once you build all the stages, the wonder is done. And you get some unique bonuses. For example, the Library of Alexandria gives you 1 science and 1 culture. A few things about the wonders. Just like the leaders, I mean, not exactly like the leaders. If you have an unfinished wonder after you advance 2 ages after the wonder's age, so for example, if you started building Library of Alexandria in age A, but you haven't finished it before the start of age 2, you will automatically lose the wonder. So don't do that. This is a very bad thing because you've usually invested civil actions to take the wonder. You have some plans how to use the wonder, and God forbid you've already invested some resources, but you haven't finished it. So if you take an HA wonder, you have to finish it before the start of H2, or otherwise you will lose it. Another thing about a wonder is that you can't start building a wonder if you have an unfinished wonder. So while I'm building the Library of Alexandria, I can't start building another wonder. And the third special thing about wonders is that each next wonder you take from the civil row of cards costs you 1 civil action more for each wonder that you already have. So let's say that I have Library of Alexandria. I build it in HA. And then in H1, I see that at the end of the row, the Universitas Carolina appears. Typically, it should cost 3 civil actions, right? That's how much civil cards cost to take from the last part of the row. But since I already have 1 wonder built, this will cost 4 actions instead of 3. 4 civil actions to take it. And I guess that's about civil cards. Did I miss something? Oh yeah, I missed the red cards, but they are military technologies. Probably now it's a good time to talk a bit about the military. As I told you, this works like any other technology, right? So every worker that I put on these technologies gives me an amount of strength, adds this amount of strength to my civilization. For example, if I have 2 workers on knights, this means that I will have a total of 4 strength if I don't have any other sources of strength. Okay. What else? I talked about the... It's a lot of information, but I prefer to give it beforehand, and then you can go back to it while I'm playing the game. And I mean, I will reference it while I'm playing the game as well. So that's about I talked about the military technologies. So I will talk a bit about the military deck and the military cards. So we've talked a lot about the civil deck. That's how the ages advance. That's how you take the majority of your cards. But you also have a military deck in this game. So the military cards, there are different types of military cards. So let's start with treaties. So at the start of your turn, you can have 1 political action. This political action can be proposing some kind of pact of a treaty to another player, declaring an aggression, declaring war, or seeding an event. And let's go through these different types of actions. So these pacts, they usually benefit both sides. For example, the Open Borders Agreement says that we both have one extra military action. But if one attacks the other, the attacking civilization adds +2 to its strength because our borders are open, right? Let's talk about tactics. I told you that military technologies work exactly like the civil ones. However, you can group your soldiers into tactics to get some extra strength. What does this mean? This means that first, the different type of military units have different types. You start with infantry and cavalry, and in later ages you get also artillery, and in the last stage you can also get air forces. But you can group your units into armies, and each army provides you an extra strength. So let's say that I have researched the knights. I have researched the knights technology, right? And I have put, so this is a cavalry type of unit. I mean, each worker here is considered a cavalry. So let's say that I have 2 workers put on warriors and then 1 worker put on knights. What happens is that, and I have this tactic. What happens is that for each 2 infantry and 1 cavalry unit, I get 3 strength on top of the amount of strength that I typically have. You can have only 1 active tactic at any time, which means that I can't have phalanx and heavy cavalry and legion at the same time. So my armies are always grouped according to 1 tactic. There are 2 ways to adopt a tactic. First, you pay the cost, which is always 1 military action, and you play it from your hand. And then this is your active tactic. The other way to adopt a tactic, if somebody else has played a tactic, after 1 turn, this tactic becomes common. So everybody else can use it, but in order to adopt a tactic that you don't play from your hand, you have to play 2 military actions, and you can take somebody else's tactic. That's it about tactics. I talked about treaties, and let's talk about aggressions. So aggressions are a type of military conflict. There are 2 types of military conflicts in this game: aggressions and wars. Wars, in H1 you don't have wars. The first wars appear in H2, and yeah, the most wars you have in H3. But aggressions, you can play them as a political action. As I told you, you have only 1 political action, so you can't play aggression and offer a pact and do everything. You just want political action to play. Aggressions, they cost military actions. You play them at the start of your turn as a political action. And the way aggressions are evaluated is the moment you play them, you compare your strength to the strength of the person that you've to the civilization you've used the aggression against. However, the defender can use cards from their hand to defend. So, and by cards from their hand, I mean from their military hand. Each card that they use, so they lose that card, they discard it, adds 1 strength to their total. And there are some special cards like these ones that add more strengths. The top, so these split cards, the top part shows how much strength you add when you defend against aggression. So this adds 2 strength if you use this card to defend against aggression. And you might ask yourself, well, the defender has a big advantage then, right? Yeah, but the defender, if they have more strength or they match the strength of the attacker, nothing happens. The defender can't win the aggression. However, if the defender can't match the strength of the attacker, something happens, something bad for the defender and good for the attacker. For example, the plunder aggression, take 3 ore and or food from your rival, and so on and so on and so on. Now I'll talk about events. So it's next to the yellow bank, it's the second, probably a bit more confusing and complicated concept in the game. So first, probably I need to tell you how you get military cards. At the end of your turn, you draw military cards equal to the number of your unused military actions. So let's say that I have 2 military actions. I haven't used any of them, which means that I will draw 2 military cards. Before you draw military cards, you discard up to the number of your military actions, I mean your total military actions, doesn't matter if they are used or not. So in the case of despotism, when the turn ends, first I will discard down to 2 military cards, and then if I haven't used any of my military actions, I will draw 2 more cards. Yeah, that's how you get military cards. And now I will talk about events. So I told you that the type of political actions are offering a pact, playing aggression or war, or seeding an event. And all these green military cards, they are exactly this. They are events that you can seed. So seeding an event means that you put this event here in the future pile of events that will happen. So there is always a current pile of the events and the future pile of events. So the game starts with 6 random HA events. And then every time somebody seeds a future event, a random card from the current event deck gets revealed, and it happens. So the effect happens. And then once the current event deck is depleted, you move the future event deck here, and it becomes the current event deck. And people start seeding new events and forming, creating the future event deck, a new future event deck. It sounds a bit complicated, but over the course of the game, you'll see that it's not. So basically, you seed an event. So an event is revealed. And what are the... So when you see the event, you score some culture. So here is the first way to score culture. And you score culture based on the H of the event card. So when you see H1 event cards, you score 1 culture per event that you see it. Again, you have only 1 political action, so you can see it only 1 event per turn. But you have to be careful, because these events usually require you to be able a bit to predict the future or the future state of the game. Let me give you an example. Immigration says that all civilizations with the most happy faces on your turn gain 1 population. Let's say that I seed this event, and at some point in the future, this event will be revealed. And if I don't have a lot of happy faces, it will benefit my opponents, but it will not benefit me. So you have to be careful what type of events you see, because you want to seed an events that will be beneficial for your future state. And this is probably the hardest part of the game, to actually play the game good, to be able to predict the future by seeding the right events. I'm really bad at this, by the way. I'm really bad at this. I usually either seed everything that I see, or I don't seed it at all. And also there are a lot of events, especially in H1, that benefit the stronger players and punish the weaker players. For example, Reign of Terror says that the weakest civilization, and by the weakest they mean the weakest in terms of strength, on your turn lose 1 population. That's bad. Or Barbarians, okay, Raiders, each of the 2 weakest civilizations on your turn lose 2 food and 2 ore. That's not so bad, but you'd rather this doesn't happen to you. So once these events start getting revealed, usually chaos ensues. And you can't predict, you can't know what your opponents will see as well. I mean, look at this one, rats. Each civilization loses all food, all stored food. Imagine you've stockpiled some food, your food production is low because you haven't researched any food technologies, and you have a lot of population that is eating your food. So you have a lot of food stores, and then the rats event gets revealed. You lose all your food and you're in a really bad spot. So yeah, events are a very important part of the game. They complicate it a lot. But again, this makes the game more interesting. Okay, and I guess the final part of the military deck that I want to talk about is the colonies. So colonies, just like any other event, so they work like other events. But when they get revealed, instead of something automatically happening, people bid for these colonies. And you bid with military units, which means that you have to send military units. I mean, the person that bids the most strength in military units wins the colony. And you have to send these units to the colony, which effectively means that you lose them. You take these workers and they return to your unused worker bank, unrecruited worker bank, the potential workers. So you lose some strength, you lose these units, but you get the colony if you have the highest bid. Keep in mind that the lower bids, they don't lose anything. So only the person that bids the highest wins the colony and loses your units. And you always need to send at least one your unit, because there are certain ways to increase your colonization force. For example, you saw these cards, the split cards, so they can be used, the top part is used to defend from an aggression, but the bottom part, while a bid for a colony is in place, you can actually use the bottom part to increase your colonization force. So if you have, let's say, a total of 2 strength, but you have 3 such cards, you can actually bid 5 and lose these cards in order to increase your colonization force. And yeah, so the colonies, they have a one-time effect and a permanent effect. So the one-time effect is what you see here in the middle. For example, the vast territory, when you win the colony, when you colonize it, you get 3 food immediately. And the permanent effect is that you get 3 yellow tokens added to your yellow bank, and you lose 1 blue token from your blue bank. So if at some point you lose the colony for some reason, you won't lose 3 food, but you will lose the permanent effect. You will lose the 3 yellow tokens, and you will gain back 1 blue token. And I guess that's it for the time being. The only thing that I haven't explained is how wars work compared to aggressions. So I guess I can do that, and then we can actually dive into the game, because I think this covers all the rules. So let's go to H2 and see how a war works. Let's take, for example, the war over territory. The war over territory says the victor takes 1 yellow token plus 1 yellow token for each 5 points of strength advantage over from the defeated civilization yellow bank. So the first difference between a war and an aggression is that wars are double-edged swords. So with the aggression, only the attacker can benefit. But with the war, whoever wins the war actually gets something from the other guy. So you have to be careful when you wage wars, when you declare wars, because it might come back to bite you. Also, wars don't get evaluated immediately. With aggressions, you declare the aggression, the defender uses some cards, and then they can defend or not, and something happens. With the war, you declare the war, and then 1 full turn needs to pass. And by 1 full turn, I mean a full turn for everybody. So you declare the war, everybody, and then the game continues. and your opponent has the chance during their turn to increase their strength by regular means. And then when your turn comes, you compare your strengths, and no cards are used this time. So the cards are used only when you defend against aggression. With the war, you declare the war, you take your turn, then everybody else takes their turn, including the person that you've declared the war against. And then when you come back to your turn, and the very start of your turn, before everything else happens, the war is evaluated. And yeah, the victor takes something from the loser. And that's it. So now, I think I talked a lot, but I guess we can make a few turns, and I will then end this video, and I will continue into another video with the rest of the real game. So the first turn of the game is a bit special, and it is special in a few ways. You can't do with your civil actions anything else but take cards from the civil row. Also, since the first player has an advantage, the civil actions are limited based on your order. So the first player, only for the first turn, they have one civil action. So they can only take cards that are worth one civil action. The second player, they have two civil actions. The third player, they have three, and the fourth player, they have the full amount of 4 civil actions that their government gives them. So yeah. And the other thing that is specific about the first turn is that after the end of the turn of every player, the row doesn't move. So we just take cards from what we see. And only after the final player, this guy Ramil, has taken all the cards that he can take, he wants to take, then the row starts moving and the game commences as usual. Also, you don't draw military cards during your first turn, because you see that the military actions are grayed out. I mean, we're supposed to have 2 military actions, but they don't count during the first turn. So what happened? This guy Nails, he took Hippocrates, which is a very interesting leader that says that basically it adds you some tokens at the end of each turn, and when you add 3 tokens, that's enough. At the start of H1, 2, and 3, instead of losing, something that I forgot to say. I mean, sorry, the game is really complicated and I forget stuff. At the start of each new H, you lose 2 yellow tokens from your bank. This represents the higher demands of people coming to your civilization. So what happens with Hippocrates is that, based on his supreme skills of healing people and actually making people healthy and happy, he stores 3 future tokens somewhere. And when H1 comes, instead of losing 2 tokens, you actually get 1 back. So effectively, you lose only 1 token. And the same happens, not to H1. So this happens after the end of H2, 3. Yeah, after the end of H1, 2, and 3. So when H1 ends, instead of losing 2 tokens, you lose only 1 yellow token. And the same happens when H2 and H3 end. So it basically makes your yellow bank depletes slower, at a slower pace compared to the usual. It's not a bad leader, I like him. So Neos, he just took Hippocrates and that's it. Then it was my turn, and what I decided to do here was yeah, and as you can see, at the end of your turn, the production happens. So he produced 2 food, 2 ore, 1 science, because that's what you start. I mean, these are the technologies and the workers you start with. We will all produce that. I just decided to take the Library of Alexandria. I mean, I'm really addicted to science in this game. I value science quite a bit. And if you manage to finish Library of Alexandria early, you get a lot of science out of it. If, let's say, the game goes for 20 turns, if you manage to finish the library on your turn 3 or 4, you will gain 15 or 16 science from this wonder, and some culture on top. But the science part is really what matters. You also can store one extra civil and military cards, but that's a marginal bonus. So yeah, I took the library of Alexandria. Then this Magzapla guy, with his 3 actions, he decided to take Alexander the Great. And did I talk about the yellow cards? I mean, I don't think I did, but they are very simple. You just take them in your hand, and then on later turns, you can play them on the turn that you took them, but on later turns, you can use them to get some bonus, a one-time bonus, and that's it. They typically give you some resources towards the production of something, or they just give you flat resources, and that's it. But yeah, so he took Alexander, he took the engineering genius, and he took the rich land. So the engineering genius, it means that you can build with a discount 1 stage of a wonder. It costs 2 less. The rich land, you can build or upgrade a mine or farm. So these rural buildings, it costs 1 less. Alexander is a very, I mean, it's a cute leader, not one of my favorites for sure. It says that you have +1 strength for each of your military units. So for example, since if he's still not elected, Alexander is still not elected as the leader of Magzapla civilization, but once he elects him, he will have 1 strength from the warrior and then 1 more strength from Alexander because he has 1 unit. And the better part of Alexander is that as a political action, so instead of doing any other political action, you may remove Alexander from play, and then you add 1 yellow token to your yellow bank, which is good because your yellow bank depletes slower. And then finally we have Ramild, who decided to take frugality for 2, which basically discounts the food cost when you recruit new workers. And then he took urban growth. I got quite surprised here that he didn't take Cleopatra or some of the wonders. So he decided to altogether skip on the HA leader and wonder on his first turn, which was very interesting decision for sure. And then on turn 1, the Middle Ages started. As you can see, what happened is that some new cards were revealed from the HA deck, and we immediately moved to H1. So each next card here will be H1 card. So Neos, he elects Hippocrates, very typical. He decided to take the Colossus. So Colossus is a very aggressive wonder. It gives you 2 strength. It gives you 1 colonization force. So each colonization force for you is +1. It costs only 6. I mean, not only, most of the wonders are HA wonders are around this, but at the start of H2 and H3, you draw 3 military cards. So it's a quite aggressive wonder, and the idea of the Colossus is to focus on your military. And for the rest of his turn, he used his worker he put his worker on bronze, so he increased his production. That's very typical to build your bronze mine on turn 1. So you start producing 3 resources, 3 ore, and then he recruited a new worker. So that requires a bit of game knowledge, but there are some HA events. I think there are 2 HA events that can be revealed that require you to have a free worker, an idle worker. So for example, we have this development of warfare on your turn. So that's the start of your turn. You may build a warrior unit for free if you have an idle worker. So until the initial event deck, all of them are revealed, it's probably not a bad idea to keep a worker in your idle worker pool, just in case such event appears and you can take advantage of it. So on my turn, I think Boudica is a better leader than Ashoka, but the problem with Boudica is that I have to pay 2 civil actions, and at the start of the game, the civil actions are a very precious resource. I didn't want to pay 2 civil actions, and Ashoka is alright. It says that if you have 2 civil cards of 2 different colors in your hand, so you can see that the different civil cards that you take have different colors, you produce one extra ore. And if you have 3 cards, so 3 or more colors, you actually produce 1 extra food and ore. So that's a lot of extra production for this age. So it's fine. So I took Ashoka, I elected him, and then, yeah, I produced a mine. I mean, I built my 3rd mine, and then increased my population to be ready for the events. And next turn, I was aiming to take 2 different cards and start producing extra ore with Ashoka. And I drew 2 cards. So the new deposits event and the Phalanx tactic. Magzapla, he elected Alexander. You see that his strength is now 2. He took the Stonehenge. So Stonehenge is a wonder that says, so it's 4-stage wonder, so it requires some, I mean, a lot of civil actions compared to a wonder like, let's say, the Colossus, which requires only 2 civil actions. But what the Stonehenge does, on top of giving you, when it's completed, 1 happy face and 1 culture per turn, for each stage of the Stonehenge you build, you immediately get science equal to that stage cost. So you get an early cushion of science. So you get 1 science, then 2, then 2, then 1 more. So a total of 6 science while you're building it. So it's definitely not a bad wonder. Again, I really like science. Again, so he increased his population. And yeah, build a farm, and not a farm, a mine, and that's it. Ramiel, the guy that didn't take a single leader or wonder, he built a mine, he increased his population using frugality, so it effectively costed him 1 foot less, He took the engineering genius, paying 2 civil actions for this, which is funny because he doesn't have a wonder. So at some point he needs to start building a wonder in order to use the engineering genius. Something that I forgot to say about the military and civil cards. If you enter into an age that is 2 ages away from a civil or military card that you have in your civil or military hand, you discard those cards. So once I enter into H2, I'll have to discard the HA card here. I mean, that's not me, that's Ramil. So when we enter H2, if he hasn't used Urban Growth, he will discard it. The same happens with Engineering Genius when he enters H3, when we all enter H3. But yeah, it's very interesting because he's... I haven't seen this before. Somebody not take any wonder or a leader in HA. That's a very interesting strategy for sure. Then we have Neos, who seeds. So you see how seeding works. So he put an unknown to us green card, H1 green card, into the future deck. And 1 card of the current deck got revealed. And in this case, it was Development of Warfare. On everybody's turn, at the start of turn, if we have a free worker, we can build a warrior for free. So basically we are saving the 2 ore for the warrior. So he uses that, he takes frugality, he takes urban growth, and he takes stockpile, a lot of yellow cards that he takes in his... I'm not sure if he did this to fuck me a bit, because Ashoka needs to, I mean, I want to have different color cards in my hand, and this way he took all the yellow cards. This first card, you see the X, so the cards with X, they get this removed at the end of turn. So at the end of each turn, at least one card gets removed. The first card always has the next. So basically, I will have no access to yellow cards for one civil action. So he might have done it for me to, I don't know, to. Yeah, so I took Warfare, and I also decided to take Barbarossa here. So Barbarossa is an H1 leader, and I like him quite a bit. So he says that for one military action, you can increase your population and build a new military unit. So typically, in order to do that, you need to spend one civil action to recruit the worker. So to take a worker from your potential worker pile, put it into your idle workers, and then you need to spend a military action. That's how you build units, by the way. That's something that I forgot to say. In order to put a worker onto a military technology, you need to spend a military action. So he basically saves you one civil action because he does all this for one military action instead of using a civil and a military action. And he also saves you some resources because this costs you 1 ore and 1 food less. So I recruit the worker, so I get the worker for 1 foot less, and I make that worker into a military unit for 1 or less. So yeah, I like Barbarossa for the future, and for the time being, I plan to keep him as another colored card in my hand to get the bonus from Ashoka. You see that at the end of my turn now, I will produce 3 ore from my mines and then 1 more from Ashoka. I increase my population in case there is an event, because the two events that require idle workers, one of it is already in the past. I mean the one that gives you a free warrior, and the other one that is the development of religion, which says that if you have an idle worker, you can build an H8 temple for free, and the temple gives you a happy face. So although this worker is not happy, if I get this event, I will build so I will build something that will give me a happy face, so it won't be an issue, and I won't have an unhappy worker working. So that's fine. So I took Barbarossa, I took Warfare, and I increased my population. And with the last action, I decided to build one stage of the Library of Alexandria. By the way, each unfinished, I mean, while the wonder is not finished, each stage that you build while the wonder is not finished takes one of your blue tokens. So this is one blue token that is currently not in my bank, so it contributes to corruption. While you're building wonders, it's easier to get into corruption. So yeah, I built the first stage of the Library of Alexandria, and that was it. Magza proceeded it. Development of politics got revealed. All of us drew 3 military cards, so that's fine. He increased his population. That was his first action. Then he took irrigation as a food technology. He built 2 stages of the Stonehenge, so he basically paid 1 and then 2 resources, a total of 3. And he immediately scored 1 science and then 2 science, and now he has 5 science, right? And he has a lot of strength because he has 2 military units, 2 of these warriors, each so yeah, Max Zapla, he has, I just wanted to show how Alexander works. So he has 2 warriors, each of them gives him 1 strength. And then because of Alexander, each military unit provides 1 additional strength. So he has a total of 4 strength. That's a lot of strength. So Ramilt, he took the monarchy for 2. No, he actually, let me see. So he took the knights for 2. So that's a military technology. It's early military technologies are important because once the HA event deck is depleted, a lot of the H1 events that got seeded, they check whoever is the strongest or the weakest. So it's good to at least not be the weakest, possibly not be among the two weakest, and then possibly if you can be among the two strongest or even the strongest, that's the better. But yeah. So he decided to spend two military actions for 2 civil actions to take the knights. Then for one more civil action, he took the monarchy. And then what did he spend? Oh, he increased his population to 2. And that was it. Okay, I think I will end this video here. I will continue with the game in the next video because it's getting a bit longer and I'm getting a bit tired to talk so much. But yeah, I know that again it's quite complicated and you're not expected to understand the rules from the first explanation, but my idea was to this explanation to serve as a basis for you to understand what's going on while the game is played, and then the actual turns will show you how the rules are applied. So I guess I'll see you in the next one.